What are some of the potential pitfalls of transitioning to an agile structure? How can we anticipate them and how can we avoid them? Well, some of the pitfalls are known. Okay, we know that you are not going to transition your organization as quickly as some of your best and brightest are going to transition their mindset. That is one of the biggest pitfalls. We know it's going to happen. How do you avoid it? You transition the organization as quickly as possible. Are you able to do that as quickly as your best and your brightest? Probably not. Depends on the size of your organization. If there's only a handful of you, yeah, you can do it because they are going to be dominant players. If you're 10,000 people, you're not. And the problem with that is when people start adopting Agile, right, it takes time to build that mass, that tipping point to be reached. And some people are going to get frustrated because that time can be years. And if you can imagine seeing a way of working that will not only work better for you, but for the organization, and it feels like every day the organization is getting its own way of doing that, you're going to get frustrated. That's what's going to happen with some of your people. They're going to see it. They're just going to, yeah, I get it. This is how I want to work. And they're going to read into it most likely, and they're going to start playing around with it and think, yes. And you're going to have a policy in your organization or a procedure or a process or a tool or whatever that makes their life hard. And when they push on it, the organization as a whole isn't ready to make that change yet. So they go and look for other jobs. We've had in the Agile world, for as long as I've been in it, a mantra of change your organization or change your organization. Make the change you want in the organization you're in. And if you can't, go somewhere you can. So the biggest pitfall I find in adopting Agile and bringing that structure into an organization is the pace at which we can do it. We need to do it as quickly as possible in the right places. It's not necessarily your whole organization. But if you've got people, traditionally we would think of software as a place for Agile. If you're adopting it there and it is causing friction in the organization because they're trying to move quickly and you've got policies and processes that are slowing them down, you're going to lose good people. And the only way to keep them is to listen to them and make the changes that they need when they need it. And you're not going to be able to do that all the time because other parts of the organization are going to be going at different speeds. Other people are going to go at different speeds. And very often what we find is people more senior in the organization have been very successful working in the current structure with the policies and procedures that are now causing the friction, the resistance. And it works for them. It has worked very well for them, and we need to respect that. We certainly need to acknowledge that. Okay? We need to help them on that journey. So they will be unknowingly and unintentionally causing some of the problems as you bring about structures. So we need to explain to them why this is important. Right? Across the board, you will hear Agilists, I hope, across the board, talk about explaining why. Before the how and the what, why does this matter? Getting people to understand why, as a company, do we need to adopt an agile way of working? Why do we need to increase our organizational agility? We need to be able to explain that in terms that everybody understands. So you're going to have multiple stories. Okay? And to help avoid losing people, okay, we're going to have to tell those stories, the right stories to the right people over and over and over. Okay? It is that good old, by the time you're sick of telling that story, they're just getting it. It really is as simple as that. Keep repeating it. Keep explaining why it's important. Keep being in the conversation, listening to whoever is raising concerns or whatever. Why are they finding it difficult? Listening to it and explaining to them as well. Most people don't just throw their hands up in the air and storm off in disgust at the first case. There's probably many cases of these frictions happening in their daily work. Okay? We need to tackle some. We can't tackle everything on day one. We need to tackle some and improve it for them, make it better, and make it better, and make it better. So for me, that's the biggest pitfall, is you're going to lose good people. The next one is believing it's isolated. Okay. Originally, we saw the Agile movement in the software world, and it's grown and expanded out of there. Yet people still think we should do this in engineering. And they can be Agile, and we'll do our own thing. what that does is it finely tunes your engine for delivering value. Okay? I very, very rarely come across, when I run a value stream map in an organization, that engineering is the slow point. Speeding them up anymore is not going to help the organization whatsoever. They know it, they get it, they've adopted Agile, they're doing Scrum or Kanban or whatever, right? And they've got it. Can they be better? Yes. Is it going to make the slightest bit of difference? No. Because the rest of the organization isn't responsive enough. It sits on things. It has committees to make decisions that just slow everything down. Okay? What you need to do when you're moving towards an agile structure is recognize the whole organization needs to be considered. It doesn't all have to shift, because there's absolutely places for traditional structures. But are you putting something in place because you've always had it there? Or are you putting in something in place because it's a sensible decision? You know, your change control team, why do they exist? Is it because change can be planned out and thought through and understood beforehand, in which case it might be a sensible thing? Or is it because everybody else has one? Which is all too common a reason. Well, we have it because this book written by those folk say we should. Awesome. Have those folk worked in your organization before? If not, it's open to challenge. It's open to question. Can you find a way to safely try running it without that committee, without that policy, that process? Can you let people use different tools? Okay? Can you experiment? The hallmark of Agile is going to be experimentation, accepting that what we have today is as good as we know, but it's not best. So there's always a way to be better. So we're going to experiment and look for improvements. That includes things beyond the initial scope of the organization you're trying to transition to this agile structure. Okay? There are lots of things that you need to look out for. Most of them you can't anticipate. Okay? This is the nature of complexity, is it makes sense afterwards. So beforehand, you couldn't have guessed. We have, and we can learn from the case studies and the adoptions that we read about in the world. Very often, your organization's transition to Agile is going to be unique. It's going to have some similarities, and you can bring experienced consultants in, Agile coaches to help you with that. But they are going to rely on that experience and a broad knowledge to create unique solutions for you. And they're going to get it wrong. They're going to try things out. They're going to experiment. They're going to do things that they think will work and discover they don't. So that hallmark of a good agilist in that situation is one not that gets annoyed, but accepts it with equanimity. They just go, okay, I thought it'd work, it didn't. I wonder why. They're going to explore why, they're going to reflect on it, they're going to research around it, and they're going to come out with a different hypothesis. And they're going to build a different experiment. And they're going to try it again. And what they're going to do every step of the way is learn more about what works for you. Not what works in a book somewhere or work for somebody else, but what works for you. The hallmark of any good transition to an agile structure is one based on experimentation.